we've talked earlier in the show about how if front end rates come in, that kind of puts some pressure on commercial banks, right?
Yep.
They make money off those net interest payments. Circle conceptually to me seems like a similar revenue stream concept. So maybe explain what you're
Yeah.
seeing here.
So what we didn't put in this slide is a discussion of the Genius Act, right? Which is in the US Senate right now. It's reached cloture. So um, the bill we get or would be ultimately signed into law should look something like what we see now. There will be amendments added, that type of stuff. But what we know now already through, the bill's progress through the Senate is, the US regulated stable coins, what they're going to look like is just going to be pretty, we call it just generic from stablecoin to stablecoin. They'll have to, by law, hold reserves, 1 to 1 in U.S. Treasury debt maturing within 93 days. So no one can compete on reserves. Like Tether's reserves are a blend of treasuries, gold, Bitcoin. They've got multiple things in there. They're not fully reserved on T-bills. The US regulated and domiciled stablecoins, they're all going to look the same. It's T-bills, right? And granted, you can have different, every week there's a new T-bill auction, times six, right? Or, set, like there's a lot of different maturities, a lot of different Q-SIPs, but by and large, they're all just stuff with the same thing. Front end maturing US Treasury debt. 1 to 1. And so these tokens that will now exist are fully reserved, I guess, bearer assets. They're non-interest bearing, right? And then they'll trade on, technically it doesn't specify, but just blockchains, public or private, right? So what the consumer is actually getting here as a dollar kind of token asset is a totally different model than the way we think of as dollars in this, credit banking, credit depository banking configuration, where your deposit is actually a super senior on-demand claim against the assets of the commercial bank, right? And so if you think about those two things, right, what is actually like your dollar that you bank like for your banking counterparty, what is it actually? It's a full liability, right? It's reserved against I guess you have the assets, the cash, et cetera. But then you're also insured because of the fractional reserve nature, deposit savings versus um, readily available cash and vault, if you will, at the bank. That system requires things like the FDIC, right? Which will potentially bail out depositors in the situation where banks run into insolvency issues. So highlight that because if you think about these stable coins as 100% reserved in T-bills, which are very close to money-like, right? They're interest bearing, but incredibly liquid, low duration. You could say zero credit risk because we'll always just expand and print more bills if the system needs to. Barring a debt limit shutdown that doesn't get resolved right in the short term. And we've still never encountered one of those, despite running into the situations countless times at this point. And you just assume it'll always, operate similar to that, where, all right, if you did get into a situation with the debt ceiling, it'll all be resolved and you'll print more, um, bail out the old bill holders with new bill issuance, rinse and repeat. Um, but the stable coins would be reserved 1 to 1. You wouldn't need an FDIC technically, and all of these extra added costs to the system of running the credit and deposits based commercial banking model that we're all used to, like for the last, I mean, forever, essentially hundreds of years. Um, and so I wanted to call out what you see in the Fed's H.8 report, the backing of on commercial large commercial bank balance sheets of treasuries, treasury securities, and then cash reserves. These are, you could say printed Federal Reserve notes held in vault, or it could be the bank's reserves that they hold on deposit with their regional Fed branch, right? But if you add those two things up, those are like a similar comparison to the reserve requirements, if you will, of a stablecoin under the Genius Act of essentially full dollar reserves, right? So what you see is, all right, ever since 2008, you see a positive trend up in both Treasury holdings per dollar deposit, as well as those cash reserves um, per dollar deposit. They're going up and to the right over the course of the post 2008 environment, which to me is kind of the bank's way of showing that they've been trying, like, the model has been trying to migrate that to what Genius Act is ultimately representing. And you'd say cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies enable, but in my opinion, it's all Bitcoin that really matters here. But that trend is very clearly up and to the right. You see higher highs and higher lows on this chart. The the lows occur, what I would say are like at the bottom of the dollar credit cycle as reserves become depleted. Yeah, and it's super apparent in the cash if you look at the green, which is it's summing the two, right? And then the highs I would say are they take place at the top of the what would be viewed as the economic expansions. Um, and so overall, you see, that trend is moving up and to the right. The banking deposit, or the credit-based commercial banking model is what this is showing is it wants to migrate to this new paradigm, that fully reserved, stablecoin banking or banknotes on these new rails that Bitcoin enables and represents. So, you see things with an IPO of a new venture taking place, immediately moving into like the large players in the U.S. Banking and kind of payments industry. I think that's a key development in this technological transition that the banking system is going through.
I think it's a really interesting point. I didn't even understand that until you just pointed that out. That if we're looking at this as of today, it's about 50 cents to $1, like you're calling out here. It's almost like the Genius Act is it's a trade off. It's saying you have to go to one, but in return, you don't actually have to provide yield back to your customers, right? If people
Oh,
start to move on to the stablecoin rails.
oh, you don't have to. It's a bridge that's optional to cross. But if you look at like growth rates and trends are what matter, right? If you're a boardroom executive or C-suite, um, you got to get on trend. So if you look at stablecoin issuance, Tether supply growing at about 30 to 40% year on year, pretty consistently. Had a big impulse on the 2020 big print, but since that big Python eating the pig, type of thing with the 2021, 2022, everything that went there. Things settle in. The last 2 to 3 years, Tether's been growing at about 30 to 40% in its issuance supply versus if you look at other deposits in the Fed H.8 report, it's like 2.5, 3%. So what this is telling you is the growth is actually in this new paradigm. This is a trend that could take, multiple years, potentially decades to develop. But you also get into that, go back and read Clayton Christensen. Once the time comes for the innovators to disrupt, the legacy players, and they'll do it because they have a better cost structure, and then they have growth behind them. Those trends will run into each other, right? So if you're just, what you don't want to be is the horse, saddle, and buggy whip salesman when Henry Ford is already just IPOing for, Ford Motor Company and just cranking out, Model Ts, you know, by the thousands.
Right.
That's what you don't want to be.